West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
The federal investigation into Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz for possible sex trafficking involving a 17-year-old girl, which he adamantly denies, has led to some really fascinating reporting about his reputation as a congressman. The Daily Beast has a striking news story which includes that numerous lawmakers have discussed Gaetz's alleged proclivity for younger women and that, quote, it's well known among Republican lawmakers that Gaetz was dating a college student, one over the age of consent, in 2018. She came to Washington as an intern. I want to be very clear, MSNBC has not confirmed this reporting, and Congressman Gaetz did not directly address the claim to the Daily Beast. We reached out to his office, seeking comment. They did not get back to us. For more on Gaetz's reputation on the Hill, I want to bring in one of the authors of that Daily Beast piece, senior politics editor, Matt Fuller. Matt, thanks for coming on the show. When you tweeted out this story, you wrote that you've been chasing allegations around Gaetz for years. Why have you been working on this for so long? What exactly is his reputation that drew you to him?
Yeah, I mean, this actually started for me almost exactly 3 years ago. We had a tip that he was dating an intern, not in his office, in another office. I sat across from that intern. I asked her questions. She later confirmed to me that, yes, she was dating him. She was over 21 at the time. We had some other concerns with the story, but the truth is we never ran it because we knew that there was a better story right around the corner. I think you're seeing a lot of this coming out that there's so many rumors that have been swirling around Matt Gaetz for years. There's always been sort of questions about what he's been up to in his extracurricular life. And, it sort of became a white whale for me. And I've heard all these different allegations. I've heard all the rumors. Members love to talk about Matt Gaetz because no one really likes Matt Gaetz. He doesn't have many friends on Capitol Hill.
And when you say
he's really sort of... Yeah, go ahead.
When you say members love to talk about Matt Gaetz, you're not just talking about Democrats, right? You're talking about Republican members.
No, I'm primarily talking about Republicans. Matt Gaetz didn't make friends here. He really attacked Republicans for insufficient Trump support. He was one of those guys who came to Congress right with Donald Trump, and he came here to be an ally of the president, or now the former president. And he made that no mistakes about that. And he went on cable news almost every night and sort of called out a lot of Republican colleagues. He did this most recently with Liz Cheney. He went to her district, the GOP conference chairwoman, and, started a campaign against her to have her lose her job in the Republican conference. This is not a man who is very well liked in the Republican conference.
So he did go to Wyoming. I just want to show our viewers what he did when he went there. Have a listen.
If Liz Cheney wants to assemble her supporters and advocate her America Last policies, I invite her to do so. I'm here to be the masthead for the America First movement going forward.
Do you think Liz Cheney's partying tonight?
I don't know about partying. I think for every Republican, this is a little bit. I mean, first of all, the allegations here are extremely serious. If true, he was victimizing a 17-year-old. We haven't confirmed that. I can tell you that, yes, I know that he dated women who were much younger than him in their early 20s. But the Justice Department probe that still remains to be unverified, at least by us at this point. I think it's certainly telling that Republicans haven't jumped to his defense. He has this, sort of insane theory about extortion, but there actually are a lot of indications that some of this might be true, or at least he has the patina of truth here. And yet Republicans aren't jumping to his aid. He's put forward this whole scheme about a $25 million plot, and somehow Bob Levinson, this disappeared former CIA agent, has reemerged in this story somehow. But Republicans aren't jumping to defend Matt Gaetz tonight, and I think that's because a lot of them are hearing these allegations and going, "Oh, that kind of rings true."
Although, come on, Matt, he's got Marjorie Taylor Greene and Jim Jordan in his corner. Who wouldn't want those two stalwarts of the party backing them?
With those by your side. I mean, it's sort of amazing in the entire Republican conference. It's Jim Jordan, who I guess in some ways is one of his closest friends in Congress. He's the ranking Republican on the Judiciary Committee. Matt Gaetz is on the Judiciary Committee. He was the Freedom Caucus chairman. Matt Gaetz is in the Freedom Caucus. And then, of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who makes no mistakes about, disbelieving any media report that is negative on Republicans.
Yeah, the woman who thought a space laser was involved in the California wildfires tells us it's all a witch hunt, so that's useful. Let me ask you this. Gaetz had reportedly been looking into leaving Congress early to go work for right-wing media. Do we know what the status on that is? Fox News seems out. They said in a statement yesterday, no one with any level of authority has had conversations with Matt Gaetz for any of our platforms. We have no interest in hiring him. Ouch.
Yeah, I think some of the interest there would have dried up pretty immediately when you have this probe hanging over you. I think that, part of this is on the same day that this information came out that he was looking to leave Congress and go take a media job, which frankly, that's been a large part of his actual congressional career, is going on TV, defending the latest Trump outrage. But I don't think it's an accident that he was looking for his exit plan, because if this is proven to be true, these allegations, he's not going to be able to stay in Congress. There's, obviously criminal ramifications for his actions, but there are also congressional ones. Speaker Pelosi said today that, it wouldn't just be him being removed from committees. The ethics committee would go after him. And,
yes.
if it is true that he's having a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old, I imagine he'd probably be expelled if he fought this.
It is Friday, the 2nd of April of 2021. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Well. It's a weekend, and we do have the French 77s virtually available for your imbibing pleasures, so please do. Remember the last 4 years when the weekends were something to dread? Isn't it nice now that with Easter coming up on Sunday, we can actually relax just a tad? Not too much now. I mean, we got how many states trying to destroy America? States with Republican leadership and legislative majorities? We can't rest too much, but at least we don't have the former guy. I don't know why they call him that. Just call him the treasonous, seditionist mobster. I know that's too many syllables. But yeah, that guy, we don't have to put up with him as much. Though we do have proxies like Matt Gaetz. Oh my God. Yeah, I was going to make some jokes about the shower that we'll need after reading all this stuff about Matt Gaetz, but then the joke will be about Jim Jordan, and we don't want to do that. Because Jim Jordan loves his shower mat. Oh, yeah, they're best friends. I wonder why. Anyway, apparently Matt is the go-to guy to get the babes, which I guess makes him the house pimp. Is there an official position for that? Like Sergeant at Arms? House pimp. Will he be appointed, or does one just rise to that position, well, on their own accord? I guess in this case it was by his own accord, and I know that they're all just allegations, and a lot of it might not be true. But I doubt that that's the case. I think it's all true. And, at the top, as we started off with the audio clip, it looks like not many in the Republican Party really like Matt Gaetz, and I wonder why. He did come in with Trump, and he was somewhat of a mini-me when it came with Trump. I guess he thought that since Trump was so unabashed in his, shall we say, attraction to the young ladies, that he could just ride on those coattails. Hey, that's the prevailing behavior. Let's do it. I'm a playboy. Well, Matt, you may be a young guy, but, we started changing that idea of manhood way back before Mad Men were, the prevailing guy. And that was when I was just a little guy myself. Yeah, I used to look at those fellas and think, those aren't manly men. Well, they act manly, and they act macho, but it's not very nice. Who wants to be that kind of a guy? Jeez. Well, Matt, he had it coming. He put himself out there, and, he could say, I'm a target. Well, yeah, damn right you are. and rightfully so. And I would also say that he's not the only one in the GOP that should be removed from office. I mean, what about that Desjardins guy who held a gun on his wife, made his mistress go get an abortion? I mean, all that came out, and he was convicted of some things, and he's still serving because the Republicans don't care. But somebody like Al Franken, in his role as a comedian, making a joke, I know it was a stupid adolescent joke about pretending he was going to grab the breasts of some starlet on a USO tour. Not even like for the crowd to see. It was just on a plane. She was asleep. Yeah, and that was like such terrible harassment. He has to leave. And he did. There was no ethics inquiry. But these guys, I mean, come on. Come on. They don't care about family values. They use it to pander. And they really don't care about the working man either. That's a real pandering behavior. And we know that because of the leaked audio by Jane Mayer of the remaining Koch brother and the other bigwig billionaires trying to, pretty much run our country as their fiefdom. What? We can't finance these things and not let anyone know about it? What? That's discriminating against us. We're the most discriminated group in the world. Well, yeah, I wouldn't say discriminated. I wouldn't say we're being prejudiced. I would say that we are being post-judiced. Yes. Yes, this is not before. This is after all of the evidence is in, and we've made a judgment. And, eat the rich. It's not cannibalism. Okay? Remember, it's only cannibalism if you eat a human. So go ahead, eat the rich. I wouldn't suggest it necessarily because I would think the tissue is full of toxic elements, and that would hurt you too. Well, I guess short of actually eating the rich, well, maybe they should be taxed at a fair rate so that they can actually become members of society once again. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fine Blue Moon Spirits Fridays? Republicans are pretending infrastructure only means roads and bridges, not anything about the power grid or anything else. Nah, not that. An ex-Texas sheriff is charged again in the probe of a black man's death that was filmed on Live PD. Yeah, that was the episode that actually Live PD stopped, being a series. A&E stopped it because of that incident. And Hulu will produce a documentary series based on the 1619 Project. And not a moment too soon. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where a British police officer has been found guilty of membership in a banned neo-Nazi group becoming Britain's first serving policeman to be convicted of a terrorism charge. And the most senior black advisor to Boris Johnson resigned the day after a report on racial disparities concluded that Britain does not have a problem with systemic racism. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is our chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who does so much more than just monitor the chat room. Thank you, Kelly. If you would then take a look across the page, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, there is the link to our Patreon site, and if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could possibly afford the cost of an espresso-type coffee drink, if you could afford to send those funds to us once a month, we are able to stretch those dollars, put it together with the dollars that we pull out of our own wallets, and then we pay our bills, which allows us to fly under the radar. And we then continue resistance broadcasting as the founders originally intended, long before the inception of Netroots Radio, which happened 10 years ago this year. That's right. We are celebrating 10 years of continuous 24/7, 365 resistance radio for your, resistance pleasure and duty. Because we do have a duty to make sure the Nazis don't win. We can't allow it. And we thank you so much for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and a whole lot more. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. And you know who they are. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts. Please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Well, late last night, and as I've just checked out the news here that's just been breaking this morning here locally, at 2:47 this morning, I thought it was around 3, which it was. Anyway, my dog, and you know who he is, our snoozing sous chef, was awakened by a loud noise. I couldn't quite tell what it was. I was sound asleep. Turned out to be an explosion. And that explosion turned out to be from a fully engulfed 3-alarm fire just down the road, not very far, about 1/8 of a mile. One of the local pubs blew up, and it looks like they took out the secondhand store, the vintage secondhand store right next door to them, and the laundromat on the other side of them. And I think it was a propane tank that exploded, and that's what was the noise that we heard. Fully engulfed, completely destroyed. And that's just right along one of the creeks that get out to the Rogue River. So that was quite a to-do. I tried to calm my English bulldog down. He was quite upset. It was a loud noise. But like I said, I did not discern it as being an explosion. But it was something that woke me up. I could not tell what it was. Something fell. That's what it sounded like. Something fell. Well, it was a big, loud bang, and it wasn't very far away. So that's the exciting news here locally. Now, why don't we get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. No fires here, and we're going to make sure. Yeah, that's right. I suspect somebody was using a flammable liquid to clean. And if you've ever seen a bleach fire in a restaurant, it's not any fun, and people suffer badly from it. So I hope that nobody was hurt, because at 2:47, people are usually still cleaning up because bars close at 2 here. All right. Well, let's tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Republicans are criticizing, it's out of the American Independent by Donna Provencher. Republicans are criticizing President Joe Biden's new jobs and infrastructure proposal, rolled out on Wednesday by the White House, for including spending on line items like energy and clean water, and falsely claiming that only roads and bridges should be included in an infrastructure plan. While President Biden marketed himself as a bipartisan bridge builder who would unify the country, in reality, only 5% of his massive $2.3 trillion partisan infrastructure proposal goes to actually building bridges, roads, and highways. Representative Bill Huizenga, Repug from, looks like Maine, tweeted on Thursday. The $2 trillion infrastructure plan and the American Jobs Plan includes allocations for both transportation, infrastructure, and domestic infrastructure. It also includes $580 billion for research and development, including support for the manufacturing sector, and about $400 billion to support the caretaking of disabled and elderly Americans. Other Republicans also took to Twitter to slam the bill for including funding for infrastructure items besides roads and bridges. South Dakota Republican Governor Kristi Noem said of Biden's plan, "I was shocked by how much doesn't go into infrastructure. It goes into research and development. It goes into housing and pipes and different initiatives like green energy." Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted that Joe Biden should have released his infrastructure plan on April Fool's Day. Less than 6% of the massive $2 trillion so-called infrastructure plan actually goes to roads, bridges, and highways. The joke is on the American people. Well, according to Media Matters, Fox News is also touting the false narrative that only roads and bridges are infrastructure. Anchor Bill Henman asked Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg why very little funding was dedicated to roads and bridges, and complained that funding was instead going toward electric grid improvements, broadband, water systems, and on it goes. These people know what infrastructure is. They're just lying to the American public because they are still working for Vlad. Staff at the Associated Press bring us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A former Texas sheriff has been charged for the second time with evidence tampering in an investigation into the death in custody of a black man that was filmed by the police reality TV series Live PD. Robert Chody was booked into a Travis County jail yesterday, Thursday, and released 20 minutes later on a $15,000 bond, a spokeswoman for the county sheriff's office said. The charge stems from the destruction of video that showed 40-year-old Javier Ambler's last moments in March of 2019, when deputies repeatedly shocked him with stun guns. Chody was not present when the deputies killed Ambler. Chody, age 50, lost a re-election bid for Williamson County Sheriff last year after being indicted on a similar charge there. His attorney did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The latest charge came about because Williamson County deputies crossed into neighboring Travis County as they pursued Ambler for 22 minutes. Ambler was suspected of failing to dim his headlights to oncoming traffic, and the new charge raises questions about where Jody will face trial. 2 deputies were indicted on manslaughter charges tied to Ambler's death earlier this week, and another county official was charged with evidence tampering. Ambler, a former postal worker, died after deputies used stun guns on him despite his pleas that he was sick and couldn't breathe. Live PD camera crews traveling with the deputies filmed the pursuit and the stop in suburban Austin, and the A&E network canceled the show in June. Police body camera video of Ambler's death was published by the Austin American Statesman and KVUE-TV last year. It shows the gasping man telling deputies that he wants to comply with their demands, but he can't because he has congestive heart failure. A&E has said the video never aired because of a policy against showing a death. Jody was charged in Williamson County in September with destroying or concealing recordings with intent to impair the investigation. He said at the time he never tampered with evidence and accused prosecutors of politicizing the case. Internal Affairs investigators with the Sheriff's Department determined that the deputies involved in Ambler's death did not violate pursuit or use of force policies. Their report doesn't indicate whether the deputies were disciplined. He failed to dim his headlights, and they stun-gunned him to death. And then they tried to cover it up. A&E has said investigators and prosecutors did not ask for the footage, and the network did not keep it after being informed that the initial probe had closed. And of course, the network has not responded for a request for comment. And even more unnamed staff at the Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Hulu will produce a documentary series based on the 1619 Project, stories in the New York Times that examine the legacy of slavery in America, dating from the arrival of the first slave ship from Africa. Roger Ross Williams, an Academy Award-winning director for his film Music by Prudence, will oversee and produce the series. The announcement was an outgrowth of a deal announced last summer by The Times, Lionsgate, and Oprah Winfrey to develop the 1619 Project into a portfolio of films, television series, and other content. They will also be producers along with Williams' business partner Jeff Martz. The Pulitzer-winning newspaper series from writer Nicole Hannah-Jones began appearing on the 400th anniversary of the ship's arrival in the then British colony of Virginia. The 1619 Project is an essential reframing of American history, Williams said. Our most cherished ideals and achievements cannot be understood without acknowledging both systemic racism and the contributions of Black Americans. And this isn't just about the past. Black people are still fighting against both the legacy of this racism and its current incarnation. The streaming service gave no indication of when the documentary series will appear, but we will wait with bated breath indeed. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, Nobody to Love. Hovering between black comedy, crime noir, and exposé, we have the new one I Care a Lot, with the award-winning Rosamund Pike nailing the lead as the nefarious Marla. Marla is a businesswoman, her business being having herself appointed by the court as a guardian for older people who allegedly can't care for themselves. With corrupt legal and medical accomplices and an apathetic court, she then converts the older people's assets into her own. She makes it look easy. This would be the exposé component I mentioned, as what you see here isn't that far from reality. Marla's plans proceed swimmingly until she picks the wrong Mark, a Jennifer Peterson, played by Diane Weist, who has a connection to a serious Russian mobster, brought off by none other than Peter Dinklage. From this point, we get a smart, if roadrunner-ish, back-and-forth escalation of legal threats, plots and ploys, and lots of violence. Not to take anything away from Dinklage's performance, but we've seen this character before. Pike's Marla, though, not so much. She's a female Gordon Gekko, confidently spouting life and business philosophies like his, but with a toxic blend of warped feminism. In fact, it's been proposed that her character may be loosely based on either, or a mashup of, Facebook's Sheryl Sandberg of Lean In fame, and or #girlbosses Sophia Amoruso, the latter of whom, for a while at least, seemed to have a haircut and wardrobe similar to Marla's. Notably, Sheryl and Sophia have fallen from grace. A more cinematic comeuppance awaits Marla. I Care a Lot juxtaposes exploitative capitalism and straight-up crime, and it's a ride to be sure, but in one this cynical, don't look for anyone to root for. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jason Goldman.
And so what happened is I started cutting open, these specimens that had, they'd been preserved and sitting in the museum collection for 5 or 6 years. And I just started, took a Dremel tool, cut off the shell, opened it up, looked at the stomach contents, and I was shocked to find that in the 10 animals that I looked at, 2 of those 10 animals had plastics in their stomach.
Greg Pauly's original plan was to compare the diets of western pond turtles, native to the creeks of the UC Davis Arboretum, with those of red-eared sliders that have been introduced. But that all changed when the herpetologist from the Urban Nature Research Center at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County began to look inside the sliders.
And then suddenly I thought, oh man, there's a much bigger story here, which is that they're ingesting plastics, and we know almost nothing about plastic ingestion in freshwater turtles. We know it's a huge issue in marine turtles, but no one's looking at this in freshwater turtles.
Plastic ingestion has been reported over and over again in each of the world's 7 types of sea turtles. But there is another 352 types of turtles, and only 5 studies have ever concerned themselves with plastic ingestion in those species. That's despite the fact that more than half of all turtle species are considered threatened with extinction. Turtles are among the most imperiled groups of animals on Earth.
Freshwater turtles around the world are declining. And so you're not, researchers aren't going out and euthanizing turtles and putting them into museum collections on a regular basis. We do that for lots of other species, but people aren't going to be doing it for turtles because it's just not the right thing to do from a conservation perspective.
Red-eared sliders are native to the southern U.S. and northern Mexico, but because they're so popular in the pet trade, They've become invasive on every continent except for Antarctica. As conservationists remove red-eared sliders from natural ecosystems, researchers like Polly can study them as proxies for native species. By seeing how much plastic the red-eared sliders from the UC Davis Arboretum are swallowing, he can get an idea for how much plastic the native western pond turtles may be ingesting as well. The researchers found bits of plastic in 5 of 65 turtles, or 8%. They used a technique called Raman spectroscopy to confirm that it really was plastic and not, say, bits of crayfish exoskeletons.
And that's what allowed us to determine that one of the plastics was a nitrile glove.
They also identified bits of plastic shopping bags and chunks of plastic cutlery. The results were published in the journal Scientific Reports.
There's not this awareness that freshwater turtles have this potential threat of plastic ingestion. And one of the big goals that we have with our paper is just trying to get increased awareness that plastic ingestion is potentially a big issue for freshwater turtles, and that if a researcher comes across a dead turtle or a veterinarian is presented with a dead turtle, that it's an opportunity to then examine those animals to see whether plastic ingestion is much more common than we currently think.
If there's good news, it's that none of the turtles that Polly's team examined seemed to have suffered from swallowing the litter. They all appeared to be in good health.
We're not here saying this is the newest, most horrible threat to freshwater turtles. It's probably still the case that loss of habitat, introduced predators, overexploitation, those are the big threats to freshwater turtles. But it might very well be that ingestion of plastics and other litter is a big threat for some species and for some populations. We don't know. But given that turtles are really having a rough go of it right now, this is the most threatened group of vertebrates. 61% of all turtle species are threatened or have gone extinct in historic times. It's a rough time to be a turtle on this planet.
Polly and his colleagues call on biologists to devote some of their attention to this understudied topic. And regular people can do their part as well, especially with all the single-use PPE we've all been wearing throughout the pandemic, like the nitrile glove pieces Polly found inside one of the turtles.
It's really easy to do. Limit the amount of single-use plastics that you yourself are even purchasing. Try to make sure that those plastics that you do purchase end up getting reused or recycled, and certainly try to make sure that those plastics don't end up in the environment.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jason Goldman.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
How many people did the Trump administration execute during the run-up to the 2020 election and before he left office?
My name is Ramsey Clark, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
The number is 13, which is 13 more federal executions than had been carried out since 2003. That's right. Since 2003, there had been exactly none. And in 2020, the federal government, with its 10 executions, executed more people than all 50 states combined. Today, there are over 2,500 people on death rows in the United States, 50 of them facing a federal death sentence. Joe Biden's position has been that he is opposed to capital punishment, a promise he could fulfill by commuting the sentences of the 50 people on federal death row to life imprisonment, and or by declaring a moratorium on federal executions. And Attorney General Eric Holder could ensure that no execution dates are set. New death sentences imposed countrywide have dropped from a high of 315 in 1996 to 18 in 2020. And the number of executions carried out has dropped from 98 in 1999 to 17 last year, including the 10 federal executions. All of which means that the death penalty in America slowly, however slowly, thankfully, is dying.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
Ralph Waldo Emerson told of a dinner guest who went on and on about the virtue of honesty, offering his own life as a model of perfect rectitude. The louder he talked of his honor, said Emerson, the faster we counted our spoons. That's my reaction to the cacophony of phony piety arising from Republican governors and legislators who are trying to enact more than 250 new state laws to stop Black, Latino, Asian American, Indigenous, and other non-Caucasian voters from casting ballots. Yet they proclaim, we're not racist, we're righteous crusaders, protecting the sanctity of the vote. Really? So why are they specifically targeting people of color with their repressive voting restrictions? For example, panicky Republican lawmakers in Georgia tried to outlaw any early voting on Sundays. Odd. Why? It's a flagrantly racist attack on the black church. For years, a joyous civic tradition called Souls to the Polls has played out in Southern black churches on Sundays prior to Election Day. After the sermon and prayers, congregants, ministers, musicians, and others in the church family travel in a caravan to early voting locations to cast ballots. It turns voting into a civic, spiritual, and fun experience. What kind of shriveled soul tries to kill that? Apparently, the same shameful souls in the Georgia GOP who want to stop local groups from providing water and snacks to citizens forced to wait for hours in line to vote. They're actually trying to make it a crime to give water to thirsty voters. Hey, Republicans, what would Jesus do? This is Jim Hightower saying the goal and duty of every public official ought to be to maximize voter turnout. After all, the more Americans who vote, the stronger our democracy. But there's the ugly political truth. Republican officials no longer support democracy. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, now live streaming on Facebook from the Chat and Chew Cafe. So grab a libation, pull up a virtual chair, and join our freewheeling conversations with political mavericks, musical agitators, and kick-ass grassroots groups. The Lowdown Happy Hour will connect you to good trouble activists who are building people power across America. Get the lowdown at hightowerlowdown.org.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day workers at the Hershey candy plant in Hershey, Pennsylvania, sat down. CIO organizers for the new United Chocolate Workers Union reported that anywhere from 2,000 to 2,400 workers were on strike. Hershey was a company town where streets were named Chocolate and Coca Avenue. Housing was built for workers, and the company funded public education and transit service. But the company also sought to monitor and control workers' behavior on their off time and showed favoritism in hiring and wages. The Great Depression created dire conditions even in the sweetest place on earth. Hours and bonuses had been cut. Workers grew increasingly frustrated with production speed up and unpredictable work schedules, all while Hershey still drew handsome profits. The company initially raised wages after meeting with the union, but then laid off the organizers 3 months later. That's when the workers shut off their machines and occupied the plant. The company refused to negotiate unless the workers left. By April 7th, dairy farmers became incensed at the loss of income. They mobilized with anti-union company forces to storm the factory and drive the strikers out. Organizers had agreed to end the strike in order to resume negotiations and avert violence. But the anti-union forces attacked the sit-downers with bats, whips, clubs, and hammers. 3 CIO organizers were singled out and severely beaten. Governor George Earle condemned the attack and blamed the county sheriff for suppressing labor rather than preventing mob rule. The strike was smashed. Attempts to install a company union failed soon after. Hershey would be one of the first candy companies to be organized when the Bakery, Confectionery, Tobacco Workers, and Grain Millers International Union won recognition 2 years later.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
I'm Mark Boulanger. Garment workers in Bangladesh are employed in dangerous poverty-level jobs, and it's the direct result of large clothing corporations. A report commissioned by the United Steelworkers in Canada, called Not Even the Bare Minimum, shows the connections between companies in Canada and specific factories in Bangladesh. To find out more about the report and the situation in Bangladesh, I talked to Ken Newman. Mr. Newman is the Steelworkers National Director for Canada. In my conversation with him, he mentions the Rana Plaza disaster, which killed 1,200, mainly young women, and injured another 2,500. But first, I asked him what the report, Not Even the Bare Minimum, does.
First of all, what the report does is that we've been able to identify Pacific garment factories in Bangladesh that supply 5 different Canadian retailers. You've got Hudson's Bay Company, you've got Joe Fresh, you got Marks, you got Nygaard, and you got Lululemon. And what the report shows is that the women who sew our clothes are earning only $6 or $7 per day. And I say not per hour, this is per day. And in our view, that isn't even enough, not nearly enough even in Bangladesh for a worker to have a decent life or to pay for reasonable housing, nutritious food, transportation, clothing, children's education, health care, and all the other essentials to try to save something for a future for a rainy day. So that's what has come out of this report. We see that some of these workers are just living, not having a living wage. That's why this report is important.
What are you asking companies to do?
Well, first and foremost, we're asking Canadian garment brands and retailers to, first of all, publicly acknowledge that they have a responsibility for workers in their global supply chains. And there are 2 urgent things that we're asking the Canadian brands that they can do immediately. The first one is to make an explicit public commitment that they will ensure that their suppliers pay workers their full wages and benefits through this pandemic. And secondly is that they commit to contributing to what is called a Global Severance Guarantee Fund that will ensure workers are never left penniless when they lose their jobs. This means that they would be entering into a legal binding agreement to pay a premium price of 1.5% on each garment that's ordered. So that's really what we're asking the Canadian companies to make a commitment to immediately up front.
Why did the Steelworkers commission the report, and why are you concerned about workers in Bangladesh?
Well, Mark, the steelworkers have a long history on international solidarity, and our union was the first one back in the mid-'80s where we established a dedicated labor fund to support worker and human rights around the world. We understand that workers' rights around the world are interconnected. Garment workers' struggles for their rights are connected to our own struggles here in Canada. And I can tell you that on a personal note, Mark, I actually visited Bangladesh 1 year after the anniversary of the Rana Plaza tragedy, and I can tell you that this has had a lasting impact on me going forward. I have witnessed many things in my career in the trade union movement or even my upbringing, and to witness what I've witnessed after the 1 year anniversary of the collapse of Rana Plaza, and to be there for the first time, the families were allowed to the site, and to see what I've seen it just brings tears to your eyes. And I always used to say, Mark, after that visit, I said, if any CEO or any major corporation seen what I've seen and witnessed of what these people have toiled through, I just do not comprehend how they could really go to bed with a clear conscience at night. So to me, that has meant a lot that I personally had a chance to go over and witness for myself, because the Bangladesh, the Rana Plaza thing was a safety matter. And since then, a lot of things have happened, and we've kind of cleaned it up. So it's for that reason that the steelworkers have taken up this fight.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 41 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting only a high of about 70 to 73, and partly to mostly cloudy today with winds light and variable. Partly cloudy skies overnight with lows in the low 40s. Winds will be picking up out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then tomorrow, Saturday. Oh, by the way, I get my second Pfizer shot tomorrow, Saturday. Oh, my. Anyway, mainly cloudy with highs in the low 70s. Winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed coronavirus cases in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon now stand at 9,297 with 121 confirmed deceased. Grass pollen is rated as low here in Rogue River proper, and the air quality index for the region is good at 25 parts per million. The daytime UV index is moderate, come down from 6 to 5. Slather on the SP30, please do. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.02 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 75%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 51 and partly cloudy. Paris is 57 and sunny. Rome is 70 degrees and sunny. Kyiv is 42 degrees and mostly cloudy. Kabul is at 54 and fair. Hong Kong is 74 and clear. Tokyo is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 68 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 48 and partly cloudy. And New York is a crisp, or shall I say, freezing 32 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. Anonymous Reuters staff bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A British police officer has been found guilty of membership of a banned neo-Nazi group and owning extremist material, including the manifesto of Norwegian mass killer Breivik, becoming Britain's first serving policeman to be convicted of a terrorism offense. Benjamin Hannam, 22, a probationary police constable with the London Metropolitan Police, was found guilty yesterday, Thursday, of belonging to National Action, a far-right organization. National Action was banned in 2016 after it praised the murder of Jo Cox, a female member of parliament who was killed in a frenzied street attack by a Nazi-obsessed loader. It was the first far-right group to be outlawed in Britain since World War II. In 2018, one of its members pleaded guilty to planning to murder another female lawmaker with a sword and making threats to kill a police officer. Following a trial at London's Old Bailey Court, Hanam was also convicted of lying on his police application forms, possessing terrorism documents. And police said that in a report. Legal restrictions on the case were lifted yesterday, Thursday, after he pleaded guilty to separate charges of possessing indecent images of a child. Wow, that seems to go on that side of the spectrum, doesn't it? Hanam, who was suspended from duty and is set to face an expedited misconduct hearing, will be sentenced on April 23rd. His first known dealings with National Action came in early 2016, 6 months before it was outlawed. But he continued with his involvement in the group and its offshoot NS-131 after the ban. Richard Smith, head of London's Counter-Terrorism Command, told reporters. Hanam had lied about having any involvement with a far-right group on his application to join the Metropolitan Police, which he did in 2018. Detectives discovered his involvement in February of 2020 following the leak of a database of members of a far-right online forum, Iron March, in which he had posted under the name Angelisic. Hanam was arrested the following month at his home, where officers found a notebook referring to the far-right group, a guide on how to use knives and weapons, and the manifesto of Norwegian mass killer Anders Behring Breivik, who killed 77 people, mostly kids, under the age of 25. Let's remember that. In Norway's worst peacetime atrocity. Detectives found Hanam had attended national action meetings in pubs, taken part in training events, and appeared in online videos after the group was banned. But there was nothing to suggest he continued contact after joining the police. Smith said the public would be concerned that someone who was a member of a banned group and managed to become a police officer, but the force acted quickly once his background was known.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Jill Lawless of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The most senior black advisor to UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has resigned the day after a report on racial disparities concluded that Britain does not have a systemic problem with racism. The government denied any link between the departure of Samuel Kasumu and the much-criticized report, which activists and academics have accused of ignoring the experiences of ethnic minority Britons. The Prime Minister's office said Kasumu would leave his job as a special advisor for civil society and communities in May, as had been his plan for several months. It denied the resignation was related to Wednesday's publication of a report by the government-appointed Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities, which concluded that Britain is not an institutionally racist country. But Simon Woolley, a former government equalities advisor and a member of the UK House of Lords, said Kasumu's exit was connected to the grubby and divisive report. There is a crisis at number 10 when it comes to acknowledging and dealing with persistent race inequality, Woolley said. The conservative government launched the inquiry into racial disparities in the wake of anti-racism protests last year. The panel of experts concluded that while outright racism exists in Britain, the country is not institutionally racist or rigged against ethnic minorities, so much so that they actually lied about what the academics said about systemic racism. They lied. They rigged it. All right. And with that, we are at the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, but you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we'll meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.